Hi, my name is Pastor Rob Myalis. I'm a Lutheran pastor in Pennsylvania, and I'd like to offer some information today and in a couple of videos, which I'm going to call Church Finances 101. In my experience, many pastors and other church leaders don't always feel comfortable with money and budgets, and this limits our ability to be effective and to even help make people's dreams come true. Ideas for ministry, how can we fund them? So my hope is through a series of videos to help pastors and other church leaders get a better handle and feel more comfortable and confident working with money. Before I was a pastor, I worked in New York City doing economic analysis for litigation, which is a complicated way of saying that really rich companies paid my boss, who then paid me to read a whole lot of financial balance sheets and budgets and so forth. And what I want to start out with, the first sort of lesson for today, and it's going to sound like something that isn't good news, but I think it hopefully will be experienced by you as grace. And that is that church finances aren't often very simple. They're actually pretty complicated. And I know that might seem like, why are you telling me that it's complicated? Well, I want to sort of help you feel like if it hasn't made sense before, that's because it's not always intuitive. So let's just say we owned a grocery store and people bought in our grocery store either peanut butter and jelly. At the end of the day, we'd look at all the money from peanut butter, we'd look at all the money from jelly, and we'd say, okay, we have $10,000 and we can give $5,000 to employees and we can spend $5,000 on buying tomorrow's peanut butter and jelly. In other words, there'd be a body, a central governing unit that would decide how we're actually going to use the money we got in. But that's not really how it works at churches. No, churches are far more complicated. So let's think of an example where we had 10 youth going on a mission trip, or 8 youth and 2 adults. And the mission trip was going to cost $400 a person, so 400 times 10 is 4,000. So how do we pay for that? Well, this church where we're serving has, let's just say they have an endowment. And we asked for $1,000 out of an endowment, and the endowment committee was happy to help fund youth. Well, it turns out that we also budgeted $1,000 out of our general fund for youth mission trips. Okay. Well, we also did a fundraiser. We raised $1,000, and maybe we sold hoagies, maybe we did a talent show, well, we did a car wash, whatever. And then at the end, we also had $1,000, and this was from parental contributions. Well, okay, let's start to think about actually what that looks like from an accounting perspective to get to our $4,000. The fundraisers and parental contributions were run through a youth fund, and maybe the youth director has sort of authority to write checks there. The general fund is something that comes out of general offerings, weekly offerings, and council decides how that money is spent, and then a congregation approves that budget, with council then being able to maybe make slight adjustments throughout the year. And the endowment is its own separate organization that has its own set of rules and timing about how they give out money. So to get our $4,000 to send the kids off to do some good work, it actually took us pulling money out of 3 different checking accounts that each of had their own rules and maybe even own secretary. Again, we're not in the world of peanut butter and jelly sales. All the money goes in and one group decides how the money's spent. This required getting multiple people, probably through multiple meetings, to agree to this money. So, when it comes to church finances, what makes it complicated is unlikely to be the volume, although at big churches maybe that's the case. What makes church finances complicated is that there's often a variety of buckets. Sometimes they're called funds at churches. They may even have their own separate checking accounts, in fact. And what happens, again, you get all these buckets, and each bucket has its own rules and even its own owner. So what I would really encourage you to do, the first thing to do, if I were at a church and I'm trying to get a sense of the finances, I would want to make a list, but really a chart, of the different accounts. And this isn't, again, line items on a budget. These are sort of buckets of money. So for instance, one bucket of money would probably be what's called your general at most churches, and that would be where the weekly offerings go to. And again, council puts forth a budget that at a congregational meeting is probably approved. But your church may have some sort of endowment. Your church probably has some sort of memorial fund for people that have died. It may have a building fund. It may also have a youth fund. There may be a women's ministry fund. Okay. There may be a cemetery. There may be a rental property. Oh, the list could go on. It's not atypical for a church to have, 5, 6, 7, even 10 different funds. In fact, the church where I currently serve probably has, within what's considered its memorial account, probably 10 different specific memorials, one for music concerts throughout the year, and so forth. So I would want to get a hold, just be able to generate this list. Then I'd want to sort of be able to know generally how big is this bucket of money. Then I'd want to know who is in charge of it, who has the say. For instance, for the cemetery, maybe you have a cemetery board or a cemetery committee. And then I'd want to know the rules. And this could be, a lot of these will have very complicated rules, but for maybe endowment, I would just say there's an endowment charter. Like, in other words, who is deciding and what rules would be there. And then if you really got good, you would even be able to tell me which checking account this is in. Because it turns out that in some churches, these are all separate checking accounts, and in other churches, they're all one, and then a spreadsheet will tell you what's divided. If you could get out of your church to know all the different accounts, how much money is in them, who is the check writer, who's determining, who has say over how this money is processed, are there any key rules or stipulations you should know? And actually